normally start this off by saying welcome back to Unlocked, but Alex and I are literally matching.
Yep. I was told to, come on, don't lie. We planned this. You got the text.
Yeah, totally planned this. Yep. Wanted to show up, looking the part.
Yep.
This
it's
is
fall,
like,
right? This is the fall.
I guess blue jeans and a brown shirt.
Yeah.
We're matching, but welcome back to Unlocked. For people that are listening, you can't see how insane we look. I have Alex Little on. For some reason, everyone loves Alex.
Thanks, Savannah. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to be here. I'm glad I chose to spend my time this evening.
I love you, except for every time I have to pay you.
Yeah, no, I understand. You're not the only person to feel that way.
So,
I get that a lot.
Yeah, trust me. So I did a podcast kind of debriefing everyone on what happened. Yep. A lot of people are confused at the outcome of Mom's resentencing.
It's confusing. I would get that.
When we did our podcast, you were very hopeful. You thought we had great arguments. We thought, there could potentially be a reduction in time. And that didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, there should have been. And I think one of the things that you have to recognize about the law is there's no such thing as the law. The law doesn't exist, right? People do things, and they're either constrained or not constrained by other people. And so, and that may sound more complicated, but what I just mean is ultimately, like, the law doesn't execute itself. It doesn't happen automatically, right? People have to do the things the law says. And so in criminal justice, just like any other aspect of courts, if the court does something that they shouldn't have done, it's up to then the other side to bring an appeal. And then it's up to the court to say, okay, you need to fix that. And then sometimes the lower courts will fix it. Sometimes they won't. And so here, the progress was the court did something in the original sentence that was wrong. We went up to the 11th Circuit. Those group of people said, actually, that's not right. You need to go back and change it. And we're at the step now where the court's like, nah, I'm not going to change it. It's good. And so there are circumstances where that's okay, right?
Yes.
I think if I had a law professor who said the law is what 90% of the judges say it is 90% of the time, meaning like 10% of the time, And so I think if you were in front of 90% of the other judges and you had a reduction where the government agreed that the loss amount, meaning like what your mom was allegedly responsible for the fraud, was reduced by, $10 million, $12 million.
Yeah.
I think it was 12 million reduction. That would result in a much reduced sentence, right? Because the seriousness of the offense is, dropped by 75%. That didn't happen. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the one judge you have, and it comes down to the one courtroom you're in and the government that you're up against. And so, one of the issues with the way that the justice system works is it is entirely dependent on the individual circumstances, which leads to vast disparities in how things happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the appeals court ruled 4.7 is what they said they could maybe find.
In the record, right.
In the record. And that's what we were expecting the judge to go off of. But when we went into the courtroom, that is not what she went off of. Or was it? So,
yeah, I mean, she said, okay, well, nothing's changed. Obviously, things had changed. And so, again, this is a complicated appellate procedure. Like, we went up, we went back. And so for folks sitting at home, it's going to be maybe hard to follow. But the thing you need to know is essentially the court said you've considered this sentence based on information which is not factually true. The things that you decided in the original sentencing, judge, weren't there. And sure enough, when we go back, the court gave the government opportunity. If you think there's facts here that support what you did, like, tell us. The government didn't have any facts to support that. They didn't try to. We reached an agreement where we all said, yeah, we think this amount is the right amount. And the judge just said, well, I don't think anything's changed. I mean, the overarching sense of her view was, well, nothing's changed. Of course, things had changed.
Everything had changed.
And so you're supposed to, as a judge, look at the new sentencing guidelines, say, okay, well, these guidelines are much reduced than what I saw before. And let me explain kind of how I get from those guidelines to a sentence that I get to. Some judges would take a much more thorough, I think, view of that explanation process and explain, okay, well, here's what my thought process was before. Here's how it's reduced. Here's why I think that matters or doesn't matter. And put that all sort of onto the record and spend a good deal of time doing that. That did not happen.
No.
If you look at just the context the content of what the court said, and by the court I mean the judge. It's sort of a lawyer word for judges. For what the judge said, the vast majority of the time that she spent talking about the sentence was complaining about this podcast, was complaining about you and criticizing you, which, is completely not what's supposed to happen in federal sentencing.
I don't have anything to do with the case. I was never indicted. I was...
I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen twice where judges have attacked family members. And each time it's just sort of floored me as like, this is inappropriate.
Well, yeah, it's inappropriate. And we're just asking you, look at the facts. But also to kind of reverse a little bit, I've seen so many times people say, oh, you continue to fight for your parents' innocence. You say they're innocent, but yet you've agreed that it's $4.7 million. Can you explain how when you're backed into a corner with the federal government, how
there's a couple different things. There's some things you can fight at different times. It is not possible at sentencing, especially the way the proceeding had gone, to dispute that amount, right? We couldn't go in and say, actually, no, never mind, it's this. Even if we believe that your mom had nothing to do with this, and I think we made those arguments on appeal and explained why the evidence was really, really flimsy. And for the folks who, this is going to be hard to believe, but the whole conviction against your mother was deemed sufficient because in one question, Mark Braddock said, yes, they helped me do this. And by they, he also referred, he may even said your mom's, I did this along with Todd and Julie. That the entire conviction, the entire scope of her involvement, the fact that she was involved in $4 million of fraud, they said was okay because Mark Braddock, an admitted, felon who got complete immunity from the government, stole multiple millions of dollars that he admitted to, and the government gave a free pass, said, oh yeah, your mom was involved. Didn't give any other details. There was no other facts about that. I think he said she paid off a loan, which is what you're supposed to do with loans for folks checking at home.
Right.
That is the fact that they relied upon, that piece of testimony to say that your mother was guilty. That's, how sometimes these things work in the system. It doesn't seem fair. It's,
No. And sometimes you have to, when you've got the government coming at you, even if you know you didn't do something, you're a criminal defense lawyer.
You're strategic about the fights that you fight.
Yes. And you also see people plead out when they are not guilty because they are so afraid of the government coming at them for 30 years.
Yeah, no, I had a client who was wrongfully convicted of murder. When we finally got him out of jail, he had to do a no contest plea to an assault, which he didn't do, just because those DAs weren't ever going to stop coming after him. Now, a year later, the governor of the state declared in a proclamation that he was absolutely innocent of all charges, including the assault that he pled to. But he wanted to go home and see his mother before she died, and she died 11 months later. So, the system is not necessarily about truth. It's often about the process. And sometimes the process and your goals getting through that process mandate that you do things that maybe people don't understand.
Yeah. And it's funny, because since I've been doing this, you've seen the people I've had on my podcast and people who have reached out and said, I would love to come on. Here's my story. And people have commented, oh, so it just looks like everyone around you has been wrongfully convicted.
Well, no, but those people who are reaching out to you, right? I mean,
exactly.
Right.
And people don't realize how often that happens.
Yeah. And look, I was a prosecutor for almost a decade. There are lots of guilty people who do lots of bad things.
Yes.
And should go to jail. And some of them should go to jail for a very, very long time. That doesn't mean that you can I think it's difficult because we believe as people, and I think this is probably this view you were before your parents got into this mess and got charged. You think, well, the system works, right? Of course it works because it's so difficult. Yeah. Right. It catches bad people because it's so difficult to imagine that it could be as bad as it is. Like, I think the same thing about prisons. Like, before you sort of learned how bad prisons were, you don't generally have an opportunity to think about the conditions of how we hold other human beings, in the name of the United States of America, or in the name of the state of Tennessee.
I think it's a huge civil rights issue at this point.
It's like, if you're a Christian, it's just a humanity issue, right? Or if you're whatever religion you are, how do you treat the least among us? I understand people who think there should be a death penalty for murderers. I understand that there are people who think if you're molester should go away for life. I understand those things. I don't understand the idea that if you committed a felony, no matter the felony, that you should essentially be relegated to a torturous existence.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Given inhumane conditions, inhumane food, not given medical care.
And that's also something in mom's sentencing we brought up to the judge. The conditions and mom's transport. Because, that's something I had a huge issue with, which I didn't know until I was faced with it, that she's being transported. She was on her way back. She was the only woman on the bus.
Yeah, it's not
the only woman.
And for what I think the part you're not saying to those who are kind of watching this is the reason that's so terrible is that male inmates can be incredibly unsafe for female inmates. They can be particularly vile. They can subject you to all sorts of things as a female inmate, just being in proximity to male inmates. That is things that you do. I mean,
and these are some men who have not seen a woman
in years,
or have not been so close to a woman in years.
Right. And it's part of, like, again, the dehumanization of people in prison. It's a really terrible result after 20, 30 years. You have somebody who committed a violent crime. Maybe they've been there for 30 years. There's a reason that there are in prison. There's a reason there are just really terrible things that happen. And if you aren't protecting other inmates from that, and it's really an issue during transport, it can be a real problem. And I think the judge was skeptical of that somehow.
Yeah. And because we had asked for
just consideration that your mom had to go through this process. And it's so easy, I think, for people in the system, whether it's a judge, whether it's a prosecutor, to just be like, yeah, that's just how it is. Just like, I'm not going to think about it. Instead of being like, what is the possible justification for subjecting this woman to, 60 days of very, very rough conditions, instead of just giving her a 40-hour furlough to drive up to the prison herself.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys know I have spoken about BetterHelp time and time again. And well, that's because I am a huge believer in therapy. And it's okay to not be okay. We've now hit the winter months, and I know for me, I most certainly get seasonal depression. When it gets cold, I am not loving life. And we also have the holidays, and holidays are obviously meant for us to enjoy, be happy, love the Christmas lights, family, all the things. It's really not that easy sometimes. A lot of us are grieving the loss of people, relationships, you name it. I know I am. Right now, I'm really not loving the holidays because I miss my parents, and that's where I turn to therapy. I know I have benefited from it tremendously. It just helps me to understand my feelings while I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, and to come to terms with what life really looks like. And let's face it, we can't do it all alone. It's extremely helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, because boundaries are a must, especially during the holiday seasons. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Savannah today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Savannah. Hi, all my podcast listeners. Whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote, and you'll be able to choose the best option for you fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at Progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Our whole
on the first time.
justification for asking was you allowed them to report to prison the first time. They clearly weren't a flight risk.
Right.
Give them 12 hours to get
To
there.
drive themselves up there, not on the government's dime. I mean,
Yeah.
instead, the government probably spent $12,000.
Oh, at least. But also, I believed it was all so contrived. Like, to get her all the places that she went on her way back, for her to end up in back in Oklahoma in, what was it? Cimarron. I think maybe that was one. I mean, she was in multiple places, but the one in Oklahoma, it was in Grady County.
Mm-hmm.
The marshal that took her off the plane, literally, and mom saw like Oklahoma correction, something on a thing, and she just started sobbing. And the U.S. Marshal was a female, and she looked at mom and she said, "I'm so sorry, I have to leave you here."
Yeah, and if you look up that prison, it has a very poor record for...
They don't even have clean drinking water.
Yeah.
Like, you have to put your water in a styrofoam cup and put it in a microwave for minutes just so it doesn't have a smell to it. Like, they have cameras in the bathrooms.
And so at this point, the people in the comments are saying, well, gosh, that's what you deserve. You should get
Yes.
that. And I think that the part that's so, like, you have to look in the mirror and you say, what level of humanity is that okay? It just, particularly because so much of the criminal justice system is really just luck of the draw. So, I mean, we haven't talked a lot about the circumstances of your parents' case, but this is stuff that happened back in 2007, 2008. The mortgage collapse, there was huge, the banks collapse. Nobody at the big firms, nobody at Bear Stearns or the investment companies that died got indicted for this massive fraud that led to the whole collapse, right?
Yeah.
I had a client who was a mortgage broker who sold mortgages. Now, he got charged, he ended up being acquitted, or his conviction got thrown out. He wasn't ever rightfully convicted. So, but he was like a mortgage broker, selling houses. Whereas the bank that he was brokering for, who had got all these millions of dollars of fake loans, I mean, nothing happened to them. So The reason I bring that up is because it's so easy to say, well, gosh, these folks are criminals, they deserve this, without going what really is a criminal? What does it mean to, in the current system of justice, be someone who is worthy of this sort of punishment?
And what led to these circumstances.
100%.
And one thing, too, that I wanted to set the record straight that I've seen comments on is the millions of dollars that mom and dad stole from taxpayers.
Yeah, I don't know what that refers to.
Please, that's what that's where people aren't doing their research and not truly seeing what this case was about. Was, first off, when they say that, they're referring to the tax evasion.
Yeah.
But can you please explain how much money was actually paid towards taxes?
A lot was paid. Yeah, I mean, I think that tax evasion means a whole bunch of different things, and here, again, if you read the opinions on this, the court's like, well, it's kind of close enough. It looks like they were, putting money in different places. But the taxes were paid in millions of dollars of worth of taxes were paid.
Yeah.
And, it goes to this sort of question of white collar crime, which these sorts of crimes around financial transactions, this is not going into a bank and robbing a bank. Right. And so the sort of what the government was arguing was illegal versus legal is stuff that, it's not the sort of thing you're yeah, that person should go to jail for a decade. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard to see that if you're not in the system, if you don't do these sorts of cases all the time, if you're not accused of one of these things, because, it's not really obvious to point to that and go say that's a crime. Right. If you see somebody that gets robbed on the side of the street, somebody holds a gun up to me that's a crime. Mm-hmm. The kind of white collar crimes we're talking about, financial crimes, it's not so simple. Do
you fault me for being as outspoken as I've been and fighting the way that I've fought?
No, look, I think everybody, so many people who are in prison, I think would be so heartened to have a family member or a friend kind of advocate for them the way that you do. The reality is that's not what usually happens. People in this process get abandoned by family, abandoned by friends. They end up in prison where they are abandoned by our society and our community. And whether or not they've done something, right? I mean, they could be innocent. They sit there for 40 years. Or they're guilty, but they certainly aren't guilty enough to sort of deserve what they get. those folks deserve people to advocate for them, to advocate for their conditions, for just humane treatment. And the fact that you are willing to do that for your parents is really important. But the fact that it happens so rarely does mean that you are fighting a system that doesn't like to be fought.
No.
And are there consequences sometimes? Absolutely. Does that mean you don't fight? Like, I think that's like, could you have a weaker and more cowardly approach to life than to say, I'm not going to fight because maybe people will get mad at me? Like, you can't live your life like that.
And that's what people say. I've had family members who, after the resentencing, made comments of, if I would have just kept my mouth shut, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, no, I think that realistically, that, the judge had her mind made up 2 years ago and hasn't changed her mind on that. And it's going to take another appeal to convince her to change her mind again. And
there have been people saying, just because you don't like what the judge has handed down doesn't mean that you just get to keep appealing and you get to have a new judge.
No, that's right. You have lawyers who figure out whether you have legal arguments or not, and you either make your legal arguments or you don't. Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're some entitled person to be like, well, no, I just don't like it. I'm going to go do this. No, you go through the system, and you have to go through the contours of the system. Like, and as I said, every court is different. Every judge is different. You get a little bit of the luck of the draw on that. You get a little bit of luck of the draw on which judges you get on appeal and how they view different things. This is not like a computer. You put your little program in, you punch your card out and say, oh, you win. It's not like that. But
I think our arguments too for this new appeal, like we've said, we went into the courtroom ready to say, hey, let's agree to 4.7. We're asking for the no offender, 0 point offenders, right, which was something that came down within the BOP that was, backdated.
So just to explain that, after your mom was sentenced, the Sentencing Commission changed the rules for folks who have no criminal history at all, who are 0 point offenders, meaning you add up their criminal history points, it's really 0. There are no arrests, no sort of other misdemeanors, there was nothing. And they found that those people rarely reoffend. They are generally not people who are ever going to see the criminal justice system again. And so because of that, you can reduce their sentence and be confident that it's generally not necessary to sentence them longer. So across the country, there are defendants who are getting reductions of time based on that change. And the majority, maybe 80% of defendants who are getting that are seeing 6, 12 months off, 3 months off, but something. And this court just said, nope, not going to consider it. Or if I'm going to consider it, I don't think it matters. Mm-hmm. That is different than how even the co-defendant here, Peter Tarantino, was treated, where the government said, let's give him 3 months.
Yes, because they did give him 3 months off.
Right.
Because he had 0 point offender. And she wasn't even willing to give it to mom.
Right. And again, I want to take it back to the point of these are people who are, who are carrying out these things, and each person's going to be different. And you're dealing with prosecutors who, if your mom was not on TV, this would have gone down very different. Yeah. She wouldn't have been charged. If your dad wasn't a celebrity, this case would have never been brought. And we just have to accept that's the way the system works. And, I think if you're on, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, you should go, that doesn't seem right. And I think a lot of times when we look at it, we're like, well, this is
funny. You and I,
not on the same side, but we think about this.
We've spoken for the past year, especially because this past year was such a huge year.
It was election.
It was an election year. And we spoke about it very in depth, and we know where I stand. But there were times that you were like, yeah, that's really screwed up.
100%. This case is a great example of how, if you're a liberal or if you're a Democrat and you think, hey, there's no such thing as, there's justice for all, it's the rule of law, and there's no such thing as political prosecutions. Not just this case, I've seen it across the country in cases where you're like, no, this is absolutely has an element of not maybe the political left-right, but this is vendettas, right? There are people who are carrying out their things. And what I'd ask someone is, take 100 people and tell me that all those people are going to be impartial in how they would carry out justice. You probably can't do that. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4, maybe it's 20 if you know a good crowd, right? But then that 100 people make up that U.S. Attorney's office. Well, which ones do you get? Who's the luck of the draw even in that office, right? And if you're going to deny that there are some cases that are brought because of the personalities of the prosecutors, then you're just denying human nature. And I think that if you're on either side of the political spectrum and you don't believe that can happen, I think Republicans have, because they've experienced it more recently, can feel like, oh, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. The prosecutions of Trump are political, and they can see it viscerally. I think Democrats haven't experienced it as recently. But, look.
It happens on both sides.
It does, because people are the ones doing it.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
you just proved your point. Yeah. It happens on both sides because people are the ones doing it. People are the ones creating the case, building the case, conducting unlawful behavior to get a case.
Yep.
Like, it's all there. The holiday season demands stamina, shopping, family drama, cocktail parties, and you know who's suffering most? Your feet. This past Thanksgiving, oh my goodness, I cooked for 50 people, and if it was not for my G-Defy shoes, I don't know how I would have made it through. G-Defy has the holiday upgrade that you need. With patented VersoShock technology, these shoes align your body and absorb shock, making foot pain so 2000 and who cares? Now you can keep moving and spilling the tea or enjoying sipping that holiday cocktail by the fire pain-free. Head to gdefy.com and use code UNLOCKED for 50% off your entire order. That's gdefy.com, code UNLOCKED for 50% off your entire order. Your feet deserve a holiday too. I don't know about you guys, but I have been scrolling social media recently, and I see all these celebrities looking thin and fit and just like fantastic. Let's face it, they didn't do it naturally. Well, some of them, yes, but a lot of them are all on the GLP-1s right now. They seem kind of hard to get, but they really aren't, because you can get access to these medications through HERS. You can get an affordable weight loss program specialized just for you. Weight loss solutions are not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone deserves to have a weight loss plan that is tailored to their specific needs. So if you're struggling with losing weight and you need some extra help, it's time you check out HERS. HERS is changing women's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable weight loss treatments. Their holistic program gives you access to personalized solutions like GLP-1 weekly injections that have the same active ingredients as Ozempic and Wegovy, and oral medication kits. HERS connects you with a medical provider who will create a personalized treatment plan tailored to your needs. If prescribed, you'll get the medication as part of a doctor-developed weight loss program, including ongoing care and online support at no additional charge. Through HERS, weight loss plans are more affordable, with compounded GLP-1 injections starting at $199 per month with a 12-month subscription paid up front, no hidden fees, and no membership fees. So start your free online visit today at forhers.com/Savannah. That's FORHERS.com/Savannah for your personalized weight loss treatment options. HERS weight loss is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions apply. Wegovy and Ozempic are not compounded. And so our arguments on this appeal are what?
So the most interesting thing is not only did the judge not reduce the sentence, she actually increased it. So there's something called supervised release, which is kind of like probation after you get out of jail. She'd originally given your mom 3 years of supervised release. And this is like, actually, you have to do drug testing. You have to report to your probation officers, restrictions on travel.
They can walk in your home. They can take your cell phone. They can take your computer.
And if you violate, they can throw you back in jail for a period of time. And
that's why a lot of what I've started to learn, a lot of prosecutors, judges, whatever, they want longer probation periods because they want to be able to pull you back in if they
That's
want
right.
to.
Or if you mess up, right? Which makes sense. Your mom originally had been sentenced by this judge to 3 years of supervised release. And for reasons that are entirely unclear, this judge gave 5. And under the case law, if you give an increase, if you win an appeal of your sentence, the court says, you know what, you need to redo that. There's something you did wrong and it needs to be reduced. And it was reduced. And the court then gives you a higher sentence and does not explain what basis there is for a higher sentence. The case law says that is just presumptively retaliatory. I mean, we don't have to prove that what's in the court's head. I'm going to retaliate against this person for the appeal. But the Supreme Court has said this, sort of set this whole line of cases is if the court comes back after losing an appeal, higher court has kicked the case back down and they say, oh yeah, more time, that it's reasonable to presume that was done as retaliation. And the remedy is to vacate the sentence and send it back, and generally send it back to a different judge who does not have the likelihood that they would retaliate based on the original appeal. And so we're in that situation here, not even considering the question of other aspects of this case which make it unusual.
Because do we mention clearly the judge has watched my podcast.
Right. So
like, do we mention that or no?
Yes. And so there is, for folks who are,
this is so odd too. Like when you sit here, you're like, are we really talking about a podcast in a federal court?
It is odd. Well, so, folks who watch true crime, you see what happens in court and there's a big focus on what's in evidence and what's actually before the court, and you can't consider what happens outside. Right. And so there's a rule against ex parte investigations. That just means investigations by yourself. So the court is generally supposed to consider evidence that the government brings, evidence that the defendants bring, evidence presented by probation office. It's all presented. We all see what it is. We all consider it. And then it leads to the court coming up with a conclusion. What the court is not supposed to do is say, well, I'm going to go over here and do some investigation, or I'm going to go read this thing that's not in the record and that you don't know about, that you can't. So imagine somebody sent a letter that said, your mom is the worst person in the world. And the judge just gets that from a friend. We don't know about it, haven't ever seen it. And the judge uses that letter to render a sentence. Well, that would be improper under this idea the court's not supposed to do that. And the reason is we, the litigants, the defendant side, the government side, are supposed to know what we're arguing about, what we're fighting over, and what the court can see. Because if the court got a letter from somebody saying, hey, your mom, ran over a puppy, we'd want to be like, no, that wasn't Julie.
Yeah.
That was somebody who looked like Julie, but it wasn't Julie. She was in a different state, right? You'd want an opportunity to respond to that and know if the court's doing that. Here, the court clearly had watched this podcast or read about it or read news stories and had a very clear view that it was not happy with what you had talked about and your views and thought that you were incorrect, which the court can have a personal opinion about that, but it can't be part of the case. And it shouldn't certainly be something the court says in the context of a colloquy where it's explaining its sentence.
Because this was a full, in the transcript, it's a
few pages.
Yeah. It's a few pages of her going into detail.
About why you're a bad guardian.
Yes, why I'm a bad guardian. And
because God forbid you tell your kids that there's a chance that there's, legal arguments that you're going to win this case.
Yeah. I think in the podcast, I said, there is a chance they could come home sooner because, it was all over the news. Right. I think the moment we found out, there was already an article that had come out about the appeal, how it was successful in part. And so I had to tell them something. And I was like, hey, this means there's a chance they could come home earlier or it could all stay the same. Right. We don't know.
And the point is, too, the court doesn't know what you're telling your siblings. And, it just is... Again, it's not something the court should be relying upon in the context of sentencing. And if the court is not using it for sentencing, it doesn't need to be using its very public and powerful position to criticize you, right? When you become a federal judge, I have a colleague who just became a federal judge up in Chicago, an incredible lawyer, wonderful person. And I can't imagine for a minute that she would get up in the middle of sentencing and just bash a family member of a defendant.
Well, a family member. And I said in my podcast, and I don't know if you agree or not, but I said that she used our personal letters as a form of just attacking us. Because in the letters, in my letter, I wrote to her and said, as a mother, I know that you know how it feels to spend time with your children and this, that, whatever. And when she was speaking to me and she said, and as a mother, I know.
Oh, there was multiple references to your letters and to the podcast and all of that.
Yes. And I'm like, how can you, first off, if she was in this position, which I know to her, she would never put herself in this position. But if she was in this position, wouldn't she want her daughters to fight like I fought?
Of course.
And so I'm like, to look at me and attack me, who I've taken 2 kids and I've done a damn good job at raising 2 kids by myself.
Fantastic job.
For 2 years, to attack me, and as a woman, I think that's what upset me so much. It wouldn't have stung as much if it came from a man, just because I'm like, what the hell ever, you know?
Because you don't generally listen to men. Yeah, okay.
No, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, as a woman, you have this sense of care and connection. You should, on how women already have. They struggle when it comes to business and raising children, trying to be successful, doing all the things.
That did not cross my mind. It totally makes sense why that's a reaction you would have.
Yeah.
I was just so shocked that this was coming up in the sentencing of your mother.
Yeah.
Right?
I think Mom even wrote on a piece of paper to you.
She did.
Like, is Savannah on trial? ?
Yeah.
Like, it was that bad.
It was unusual.
I almost stood up.
I'm glad you didn't.
I almost stood up and said something.
I'm glad you didn't.
But then all I could think of is she would love nothing more than to throw me in Fulton County Jail right now.
But you know, back then, Young Thug was there. You guys you and Brian Steele, you could all 3 have been in.
Me,
been in a cell.
Brian Steele, Young Thug. I mean, could we?
It's the place to be, apparently.
Could we not have gotten his new judge that he ended his trial with?
I know. Well. I mean, that's one of the things we're asking for in the appeal. The appeal is that it be sent to a new judge. Now, that's a state court judge, one federal court.
I know, but could we not get one like her? Like,
I think that, I mean, if nothing else, I think people should recognize that, you know, who the judge is in a particular case, and we're talking about nominating judges or just generally that position. They have lifetime tenure. It's an incredibly powerful position. And you talk to attorneys, they will tell you there's a lot of differences in how judges do things and how judges do sentencing. You know, and it is... One of the reasons we have the sentencing guidelines, in fact, was to try to reduce the differences between what judges would give. Mm-hmm. And so that worked for like 20 years, and then that got thrown out. And they said, okay, you just have to, the guidelines don't really matter. And now we're back to a system that's a little more like kind of luck of the draw on who the case is assigned to.
Well, yeah, and you need to be knowledgeable about who you're voting for at a state level, because... I've seen it firsthand in Nashville. You still have Good Old Boys Club. You still have all these, like in any big city, you still have the Good Old Boys Club. Yeah. Like, so how these judges are put in their seats.
Do your homework, folks.
Exactly. Like, do your homework, because it's not. Yes, some of them are very credible and deserve the seat, and there's a lot that don't, who are there as a favor.
Or they just got nothing else to do.
Yeah, or there's that.
Now, I think being a federal judge, they have too much work to do. In state court, you can kind of knock off early, like do a little bit less. In federal court, they're keeping them busy.
Yeah, but even in our case, I remember it was like a holiday, and she was like, we're all ready to get home for the holiday weekend. Let's wrap this up. I don't want to be here all day. And it's like, isn't it your job and per your code of ethics to give it the time that it needs to get the truth out there?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like, you know, you're dealing with people, and people's priorities aren't always going to be your priorities. Yeah,
you're correct on that. Okay, so timelines. So we've kind of given them our argument.
Yep, that brief we'll file next week, or whatever this year's will be, the 30th. The brief will be filed November 30th. The government then has 40 days to respond. I would expect the Court of Appeals to set it for sometime early spring next year.
Okay.
So again, argument in Atlanta. Let's not get caught in the elevator.
Oh my God.
I don't think we've told that story.
We have not. I almost puked on everyone.
Thank you for avoiding that. I appreciate it. That would make the story better.
I did. Please tell them what happened.
So we had the oral argument in your mom and dad's case, the first appeal.
And the courtroom was full. It
was very, very packed. And so there's a lot of people coming out, some pro, some con. And we decided to take the elevator. And not just we, I mean, your entire family.
Oh, they decided, Chase and his girlfriend decided they're going to run and jump on the elevator too.
And so there were like literally 11 or 12 of us in a not large old elevator.
Historic.
This is a historic courthouse. It's been around for a while. And we close the doors, and it kind of goes about 4 feet down. And then you hear a weird noise, and the power kind of goes out. And we're all looking around like, are we actually stuck on this elevator? And we were.
And
none of the buttons worked.
I didn't sleep the night before, as you know.
And everybody's exhausted.
Yeah.
And it's all sort of stressful. We just had this oral argument for 30 minutes. It's hot. And we have to start yelling for like, hey, has anybody noticed that we're in this elevator?
I start like taking off my jacket. I was like, I am going to puke. If I don't get off this elevator, I'm going to puke. And people were talking.
But hold on, and your grandma was on the elevator?
Yes, everybody.
I mean, everybody was on the elevator.
And I was just like, if everybody does not shut the hell up, I am going to like. And then Alex is just like, cool, calm and collected. Like, I don't know.
I was like, let me tell you the story.
It was like he had just smoked a joint. Literally, he's over there just.
When you argue in front of a court, you have to, use your brain. And so I was just sort of checked out at that point. I'm also thinking, is this real life? I'm stuck with the Chrisley family in an elevator in a historic courthouse. And like at this point, we don't know how long it's going to be because they tell us like, hey, it's not working. We have to call the guy. Yeah. Remember, they had to like call the guy.
We have to call the guy.
And so I'm thinking like, we're here for an hour. We're here for like 2 hours. It was a good 15 minutes.
Oh, at least.
Which elevator time is like dog years. It's like 7 times as long.
Yeah. And like the press is waiting outside.
Like, what is that family doing?
Yeah. Like they probably thought we had
dodged the back door.
Another way, but yeah, we got stuck. So let's just say this whole legal process has been quite interesting.
Yeah.
Alex and I've been on quite the ride, and
it's been good times.
We hope it ends soon.
I do. I do think there's going to be changes in the Justice Department. There's going to be changes throughout the executive branch. I hope that those changes will be good to your parents.
Yeah. You and me both, because I have fought hard. And you and I have discussed, if this case would have been tried differently from the very beginning, from the state of Georgia to the feds, if it would have been a clean-cut case, all right, you get your conviction. Like, is what it is. Like, now, granted, do I think people deserve to be in prison for 12 years? For a financial crime? No.
Yeah.
But if the government would have went about this case legally and didn't break the law to get a conviction and didn't lie, didn't throw out immunity deals, didn't take them 7 years to issue a formal indictment, like there were so many things wrong with it that if it would have been clean, they could have proved a case without a shadow of a doubt that my parents were guilty, it would have sucked. But
it would have been a lot easier for you to take.
But it would have been a lot easier for me to take. And I would have been like, you know what? This sucks. This is our life. This is our punishment. Let's figure out how we move forward. But that's not what happened.
But I think that's why it's so important. Like, process matters. Transparency matters. I mean, I think we have a lot of prosecutors in this country that care about like, I'm going to get a conviction. I'm going to get a press release.
Yes.
I'm going to be up there on TV to do this. And they don't really care about the process. Like, if you're a prosecutor and you can't just turn over the evidence you have and you're afraid to disclose certain things, like, then it's not a fair fight.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you have to hide things, if you have to sort of gain an advantage, then what are you doing? Because the people see that. And I think after the fact, so many things in terms of how things get done incorrectly, wrongful convictions we find out about later, is because prosecutors have cut corners or have been more concerned about the end result and not about the process. Process matters.
Do you think we'll ever see cameras in federal courtrooms?
I think we 100% should, and it's a disgrace that we don't have them.
Why don't we?
Because
why do you have it in state court and you see it on court TV, but...
The only reason we don't have it is because the Supreme Court doesn't want it. And I think they don't want it because they are afraid of the backlash from the public to see what they do in real time. And I think there's been debates about this. Some people theorize that some justices think that other justices might try to like ham for the cameras and sort of say things for more of the public view than the decision of the case. But in district courts where cases are tried, there's no excuse for not having cameras. We've done it in states for decades.
And I don't think it holds these judges accountable. It holds these prosecutors accountable.
Why in a country like America, if a case happens in federal court, we can't find out what was said until the transcript comes out either that evening or the next day?
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, I think we have to make that happen.
But that's an easy one. I mean, there's also things like just in the way that for years and years, the FBI refused to record interviews. Now, there's some reasons strategically they didn't want to record interviews.
Yes.
But I think it's pretty clear for both sides of a case that really the best evidence is a recorded conversation. If somebody's going to confess and you have it on tape, well, great, we can listen to it. If you're going to coerce them into a confession, well, the tape's going to show as the defense what these folks did to coerce that confession. But why it's ever in the interest to not have that recording is, to me, just insane. So they changed the rule to allow it. And so now the question is, can we mandate that, right, across Department of Justice interviews? Yeah. There's just things like that just make a ton of sense. If the government, like right now, the government doesn't have to give you their file or show you their file. And there's this huge game back and forth of, oh, we'll give you this, we don't have to give you that, we'll give you this, we don't have to give you that. You get more information about a case in a civil lawsuit than you do a criminal case. So imagine this.
That's why a lot of people are strategic.
Like, so if you got charged with murder, so let's imagine someone you might kill. I won't name names, but
let's not.
But if you got charged with murder, the people who are testifying against you, the first time you would hear their testimony is at your trial. If you rear end somebody in a fender bender, you get the chance to ask them questions before trial and then again at trial.
Yeah.
How in the world does that make sense?
Yeah, it doesn't.
The only reason it's that way is because, gosh, it takes a lot of time and effort to do that in criminal cases. So we have a criminal justice system which is less protective of defendants than our civil justice system is of freaking car accidents.
Yeah, and where do we go to get that change? Like, where do you start?
Congress could do that in a heartbeat. They could pass a statute that says, hey, in every criminal case, the defense is allowed to question witnesses in the same way they do depositions in a civil case. I'd write that statute give me 15 minutes. We can get that done. It's not hard.
We're going to work on these things because that will hold more people. You will see less convictions if people actually have to go through the proper channels.
Well, you'll see less convictions that are dubious, right? The process, if we have a civil justice system that says, it makes our trials better if we can ask witnesses questions before trial, if we have to hand over every document we have that's relevant. If we do that in our civil court about car accidents or medical malpractice or lawsuits over businesses, we think that's the best system because it gets all the information out. Why would in the criminal justice system where people's lives and families are on the line, why would we want a system that is less, transparent?
Yeah.
The only answer is because we just want to do it easier. We want to put people in jail quicker. We don't want to take as many steps to get there. That
is absolutely insane. All right, before we end, something totally, it's not off topic, but it's another case that I want to get your viewpoint on.
Boom, boom, boom. The Menendez brothers, which ones are we going to talk about?
Oh, that one, but okay, let's do two, okay?
Okay.
All right, what do you think is going to happen with the Menendez brothers?
I think that they wouldn't have got this far unless there's a plan that they get released. It's really hard to know if that's the right answer. I think that our views have changed about how likely it is around being abused and things of that sort.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that piece of it. I felt it pretty compelling that the stories that you watch their testimony now, I don't know that I would have come out the way the jury did because it sounds pretty believable.
Yeah.
But I don't think we would have gotten to this point
without. Didn't they have their first trial was what? They weren't convicted the first trial, and then the second trial they were?
They were convicted, yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, there was the hanging. There was
a hung jury the first time. Second time they were convicted.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think?
I think the whole process, it's moving in this direction because they're going to get parole.
Okay,
yeah.
So you think they're getting out? All right, did he?
Did he do it? Yeah.
That's a good one.
Is that your question? Or?
No. What do you think the process of what's happening right now with P. Diddy and how do you see it playing out?
So I know the folks in that office who do that sort of cases around sex crimes pretty well. They are super professional. I think it's some of the...
they're some of the best in the country.
Very, very good. They have a whole team of FBI agents and investigators that specifically work with victims of sex crimes. And so they are going to be on top of their game. They're going to do things the right way. And, I think they are not going to bring a case unless they feel very, very confident about the case. Mm-hmm. And so, as the evidence sort of comes out, did you watch the video of him in jail with the phone call about the pizza boxes?
Yes. I don't know if that's real, though. And this is what scares me.
I don't know either. I was like,
AI.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
So there's a lot of people saying that's AI.
But my point of that is there is, when they get to court, it's not going to be AI, right? The stuff that they have is real. And
if that is a real recording,
that's bonkers. They generally don't have recordings of, they have recordings of the phone calls. They generally don't have videos of recordings, which was sort of suspicious about that.
Yeah.
But the actual point about the whole Diddy evidence is it's going to play out in court if he doesn't take a deal. And, the danger when you have a case like that, thinking about it from the defense perspective, is the consequences are so grave if he gets convicted in terms of potential sentences. And not that they shouldn't be, but if he did those things, a large sentence makes sense. That you start to think about the calculus of what's the likelihood of you winning and losing based on what the potential downside is, mm-hmm. right? And so it's a sort of case where it's not you could conceive of a plea agreement that sort of wraps it up. It's also in those sorts of cases with victims, where as a prosecutor, you might be more willing to take what some people might see as a lenient plea to save your survivors from having to testify, mm-hmm. right? Because you don't want them to go through that process again. So my overarching view in a case like that is it's super high stakes, and high stakes cases like that tend to be more likely to resolve.
Do you think you'll see more celebrities get exposed through the Diddy case?
Look, just what's known publicly about the presence of video cameras. I don't know if there'll be other people charged, but I think it's not impossible to see more people reference that, hey, you were there when this mm-hmm. happened, right? It's not a crime, or we're not going to charge you with a crime, but this person might be a witness, who are A-listers, or certainly now are.
And do you not think there's going to be jurisdictional issues?
Yeah, that's always a problem with.
That's what I was confused about.
Multiple locations.
Diddy, I think, scum of the earth. Have stuff.
I don't know the man.
No,
the accusations don't look great.
The accusations do not look great. But it was the gun charges. Right. The photos were from his house in Miami, but he's charged
up in New York. Yeah.
In New York.
Well, so it's part of the things that I think they're going to have to, they'll be fighting about when you can do that, when you can't. Yeah. And he's got a very, very good legal team. He's got fantastic, trial lawyers and appellate lawyers, and
Mark Ignifilo.
Good folks.
First off, I will preach his praises. Mark, when all this crap was going on with mom and dad, I know Mark because he's the brother-in-law of Gunnar Peterson. And so Gunnar connected me with him, and I was running all this stuff through him, and he was Savannah, he was I'm not charging you. And Mark's fee is hefty. He's going to make millions and millions and millions off of Diddy. But he was I'm not charging you. He was if you have any questions, you have anything, he was I wouldn't do anything different than your lawyers are doing. You call me, text me anytime, I'll help you. Great guy, his lawyer is.
No, he's got a good team. And then, so you, again, to your point about if it's done the right way, people trust the result. He's got a very competent legal team. They're going to fight the things that they think are appropriate to fight. And it's going to be interesting to see what's real and what's not. To kind of take it back to this case, it's easy to look at those accusations and say he did it, he's scum of the earth.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it certainly doesn't look good. Is that a situation I want my family member to be in? No. But if he wants a trial, he's going to get a trial.
Yeah. And with the country we live in, you deserve the right to a fair trial. And that's 100%. Why recently they have tried to put gag orders in place to keep the media and people from speaking about the trial, because there is no way for him to get a fair trial with the media coverage that's happening right now.
I will say, New York's a big place, and they did find people in the OJ trial who apparently didn't know about that whole case, and they had a jury.
That is crazy.
It's like nurses who work only at night, right? Or
right.
Just
you're gonna get some
a
people.
Guy who lives on an island by himself.
And didn't they there's some homestead law? Is it accurate that even if he is sued, that they cannot take his primary residence?
So I think you're referring to Florida has some very protective laws around when a creditor can seek to like seize your home.
Yes.
And I think generally there's a debate about whether if he was sued, his very, very expensive house would be part of that.
I think it's like $40 million.
It's not cheap.
40, 60 million, somewhere in there, and it's paid off.
Right. It's a nice house.
Yeah. It's not bad. I mean, I would live in it. Yeah. Not with Diddy, but I would live in it. But, well, we went off on our rant, but thank you. I appreciate
Always
you.
fun.
People love you, so I guess I gave them what they wanted.
Thanks. Take care.